In this movie, I want to talk about a couple more strategies for success, in particular, stretching and shortcuts. Now, this first one is going to sound a little bit goofy, but I totally believe it to be true. We spend so much time sitting while we're working in front of a computer, and we forget to stretch. We forget to stay limber. So here are a handful of stretches that you can do if you spend a lot of time sitting. I've found those to be incredibly helpful. Here's one of my favorite stretches, and as it says, this stretch may cause people around you to think you're very strange, but hey, it's a pretty cool stretch. You know why? Because we hold so much tension in our face. So here's what you're supposed to do. Raise your eyebrows, open your mouth as wide as possible, and stick out your tongue. Hold the stretch for 5 or 10 seconds, and what it does is it gets the tension out of your face. There's so many intricate muscles in your face, and we can visually see that tension in people's faces. And if you release that, what you'll find it will do is it will actually clear up your vision, and it will give you a fresh perspective on what you're doing. Well, let's jump to the next strategy, and this next strategy has to do with shortcuts. Here's a photograph of my office wall, and I have a VW Bug hood on the office wall. And one of the reasons I think that VW Bug hood is kind of interesting is because I've isolated this car part, and I put it on my wall, and I use it as a magnet board as well as a backdrop for portraits and all this other stuff. But it looks interesting because I've taken it out of context, put it in its own context. I've isolated it, and I've displayed it. We need to do that as we start to learn shortcuts, and let me explain. Here we have a photograph of an old keyboard that I had. I took apart the keys and set them up on this concrete floor because I thought it looked kind of interesting. And there are all of these complex keys, and there's a number of different shortcuts that we're going to learn in regards to Photoshop. One of the shortcuts that we're going to learn has to do with the bracket key. Well, if we focus in on the bracket key and we say, you know what, for starters, the bracket key goes hand in hand with the brush tool as well as a couple of other tools. But let's focus in on the brush tool. And we say if we press the left bracket key, what we can do is actually decrease our brush size. Well, then, of course, the right bracket key is going to increase the size, right? So we have left bracket key gives us a smaller brush size. Well, if we isolate this and then display this in a way that's very simple to look at, we can learn that shortcut key. We're taking one key out of a whole mix of keys in order to learn a shortcut. So here's what I think you need to do as you're working on this training. You obviously need to keep a binder where you're taking handwritten notes. But then my recommendation is that you have a smaller notebook where you're recording all of your shortcuts that you're learning in this training. That way you're isolating the shortcuts. I find that it's going to reinforce those shortcuts so that I can become more effective, more efficient, and ultimately more creative. Well, there are a few more strategies that I want to share with you, and we'll do that in the next movie.